Russia's war in Ukraine has been going extremely poorly in recent months. The Ukrainian armed forces have practically paralyzed the vastly superior Russian army, gaining a tactical and technological advantage. And, as the Wall Street Journal reports, this summer will reveal whether Ukraine can turn this marginal advantage into a strategic turning point. At the same time, many analysts warn that it is too early to say that the war has reached a turning point. Things are bad in Russia, but not bad enough to force Vladimir Putin to act. And he shows no sign of abandoning his quest to subjugate Ukraine, the Wall Street Journal writes. As military analyst Franz-Stefan Gady notes, Ukraine is undoubtedly in a stronger position than many expected. But war involves cycles of adaptation, and the question is whether Russia will be able to find the answers to improve Ukraine. At this stage of the war, we can only look ahead with certainty to the next few weeks, he says. Russia's advance this year is the slowest in 2 years, with analysts estimating losses at up to 35,000 killed or wounded soldiers per month. Ukrainian brigades have learned to better counter Russian infiltration tactics, which Russia relied on last year. Ukrainian fighters are using drones and clearing teams to track enemy soldiers who slip past infantry positions, said Rob Lee, a research fellow at the Foreign Policy Research Institute. Some Ukrainian units are honing new counteroffensive tactics that combine drones and infantry. Ukraine's chronic manpower shortage limits its capabilities to localized successes rather than major breakthroughs. However, unlike in 2025, when Ukraine was almost entirely on the defensive, some sections of the 600-mile front line are now contested in both directions. Ukraine's success in using medium-range drones, some 20 to 200 miles from the front lines, is perhaps the biggest change this spring, the Wall Street Journal writes. Ukraine is deploying an ever-increasing fleet of medium-range drones, such as the Hornet and FP2, which are striking Russian drone control groups, logistics facilities, command posts, air defense systems, warehouses, and other targets in the rear. This is complicating Russia's support for frontline operations. Meanwhile, Ukraine has improved its countermeasures against Russian medium-range drones, creating a multi-layered system of radars, electronic warfare systems, and interceptor groups. It's becoming increasingly difficult for Russia to strike at such ranges, Lee said. Since the end of 2025, the number of killed or seriously wounded Russians has equaled the number of new recruits in Russia, so the number of airborne forces is no longer growing, Gady said. The cost of recruiting people with high signing bonuses puts pressure on Russian finances. But the US-led war against Iran has eased this pressure somewhat. For now, the flow of people willing to be recruited for money continues, said Alexander Gabov, director of the Carnegie Center for Russia and Eurasia. Damage to oil refineries and export terminals partially offset revenues from rising oil prices, but did not completely offset them. According to the International Energy Agency, Russia received significantly higher revenues from oil exports in March and April. Meanwhile, in Russia, despite the growing awareness that war is a quagmire, there is no sign that Putin is softening his military goals. Damage to oil refineries and export terminals partially offset revenues from rising oil prices, but did not completely offset them. According to the International Energy Agency, Russia received significantly higher revenues from oil exports in March and April. Meanwhile, in Russia, despite the growing awareness that war is a quagmire, there is no sign that Putin is softening his military goals. Earlier, German historian Matthias Scheel stated that a quick end to the war in Ukraine should not be expected. The expert noted that there are numerous historical examples of wars dragging on for years, despite attrition and signs of peace, because both sides believed in an imminent victory. The expert noted that there are numerous historical examples of wars dragging on for years, despite exhaustion and signs of peace, because both sides believed in imminent victory. He also noted that in Russia's war in Ukraine, one side may realize too late that the end is near. Currently, there appear to be no effective countermeasures against the overwhelming power of drones. They will first need to be destroyed on the battlefield before another successful offensive is possible. Due to the high costs, only lasers or machine guns will remain viable options, Yule said. The expert asserts that Russia is still capable of waging war thanks to its resources. Despite economic problems and sanctions, the systemic collapse the West expected has not occurred. The expert also believes that if the number of volunteers lured by large sums of money potentially declines, Moscow will resort to other means of recruiting personnel for the front. Further partial mobilization or even the transformation of the military special operation into an anti-terrorist operation is possible. At the same time, in his opinion, Ukraine is at a disadvantage in terms of human resources, and the shortage of soldiers, and especially infantry, will most likely become a serious problem. The expert notes that Kyiv currently lacks the manpower for larger-scale offensives, and the country remains dependent on Western weapons and intelligence. The situation will likely escalate further. The final measure will likely be the mobilization of men aged 18 to 25, who are currently exempt from compulsory military service, he says. Meanwhile, some Western observers and military analysts believe that a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine may be near, and the midterm elections in the US could play a key role in ending the war. Russian dictator Vladimir Putin also recently declared that the Russian-Ukrainian war is supposedly nearing an end. Vladimir Putin stated that he is ready to meet with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky not only in Moscow but also in a third country. He made this statement during a press conference following the military parade in Moscow. Putin said he was prepared to meet with Zelensky, but only to sign the agreement. He added that the US sincerely seeks a settlement, but that this is primarily a matter for Ukraine and Russia. Putin also accused Ukraine of allegedly failing to send Moscow any proposals for a prisoner exchange. Even before Trump's proposal, Russia sent Ukraine a proposal to exchange prisoners of war. No proposals for a prisoner exchange have yet been received from Kyiv, the Russian dictator said. The head of the Kremlin stated that Russia has handed over to Ukraine a list of Ukrainian soldiers currently in captivity. Russia gave Ukraine a list of 500 Ukrainian soldiers in captivity, but Kyiv then disappeared from the radar, the Russian dictator added. Putin stated that military equipment was not present at the parade in Moscow because this year does not mark the anniversary of the end of the Great Patriotic War. He also added that Russian troops should focus their attention on the so-called SVO. Putin believes that the Russian-Ukrainian war is supposedly nearing its end. I think the Ukrainian conflict is coming to an end, the Russian leader said. Putin also came up with a new reason for starting the war against Ukraine. Events in Ukraine began after Kyiv's attempts to associate with the EU, the Kremlin leader stated. However, German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius believes Putin's pronouncements about peace should not be trusted, as he too often relies on deception and maneuvers provoked by internal difficulties.